So this is the UnaVision group. Thank you for joining. I'd like to introduce first, for the next 15 minutes, the initiative we started, and then get your input and your ideas, also how you could be connected to this. Unfortunately, the slides are a little bit small, but I'll tell you what's written on them. So from the history, it's a part of my history also. My background, I was a banker. I ran a company for 25 years, consulting small and medium-sized companies, a lot in the German-speaking area, but also in other countries in Europe and Asia and the US. And in the late 90s, we made a systems analysis. What impact do we have on society? So we were 24 consultants around, and when we analyzed this, we found out that we have a very positive impact on shareholder value. So the shareholders got more and more money, and society had less and less competition, and people were fired, and that made me think. So do we do any good? So for 25 years I tried to make companies more sustainable, and the result was a disaster for most of society. So at that point, we started an initiative in the German-speaking countries primarily, which is called the Global Marshall Plan. The idea was to connect NGOs, to connect non-profit organizations, to connect learning institutions, to speak from one voice to the governments, to speak to the European Union and the UN. And we wrote to about 40,000 groups around the globe, and to join for a couple of common problems we see on our planet, and to speak with one voice. And the result was also very negative. Most NGOs or non-profits are in a very competitive market for funds, for their identity, and so on. So it was very problematic to work together. Several groups, maybe 50 or 60, answered, and they said, okay, you can put our label on your homepage or so, but they did not really like to collaborate. But we started the initiative anyhow. It was quite a good success. In that way, we are at the moment around 12,000 people in the German-speaking countries. We run many academies. There are student groups working every year on projects. We're about 120, which we call Hochschultage, so they about sustainable development and projects. And also one other initiative from the co-founder of this movement was Plant for the Planet. It's run by children, 10, 11-year-old children, and they are planting trees. It started 7 years ago, 8 years ago. After 2 years, they planted the 1 millionth tree in Germany together with Ms. Merkel. And about 1 month ago, they planted the 100 millionth tree in Mexico. It's in 60 countries now, but it's not really the effect. It will be much more. There will be a big movement there, but a lot of it is monoculture. So you have eucalyptus trees or whatever. The majority is now in Mexico going on. So 5 years ago, when we made a review about these activities, we said this is not the solution. We need something else. And we did not know what we need. So we formed a new non-profit cooperative and said, let's ask the people. And how should we do it? So a small group started walking. And we walked for nearly 1 year through 14 countries, had more than 50 workshops with about 2,000 people. And we were asking one key question: what do you really, really like to do with your life, for yourself and for society? And most people said, I don't know. I don't like the current planet and the current situation, but I don't know what to do. And out of this movement, about half a year later in Budapest, when we had a big open space workshop, a name was created which is being space, UnaVision. It started with UnaVision, the vision for the Danube River countries, which are 18 countries, the most international river on the planet with 85 million people. But as we moved out of this region, we had to change the name, so we changed it to UnaVision, to One Vision. And the One Vision means what we all like. It's a better life, it's good life. But each person defines it differently. So for you, maybe good life is better food, for others it's more room and so on. But we have something in common, that we want a better life somehow. Well, this is a common motto. And since that time, I and some friends traveled to more than 35 countries and started to initiate groups like that. We worked a lot in the Balkans. In Kosovo was the first one, because we thought, it's a good start. People need work there, and we want to start a village project. But it was quite a disaster. Due to the political issues there, a lot of bribes and corruption in the governments. We found now a mayor who is quite integral, and he's willing to give some land in the villages there. And then it moved on in Macedonia and Albania, in Greece, in Slovenia and Germany, and in Mexico also. Tryon is one of the guys. We did a journey in Mexico together, visiting also alternative universities. So what's the idea behind it? The people didn't know what to do, especially a lot of young people graduating from university, or dropouts from university, burnout people after 20 years of work with big companies. They had a burnout and they didn't know what to do. Many female women, divorced female women with children, they get lost in the big cities, and also elderly people like myself who said, oh, do I want to stay in an apartment alone in a city or so? So it's a big target group. In Europe, maybe around 1 to 200 million people who are not really satisfied with the current life. And the idea of the being space is to create experimental village locations where everybody can move and see how can we live in the future. But as we don't know, we like to prototype it, to experiment it, to use and to be open to failure. So we also went to 30 eco-villages and said, are you willing to do that? Tamera as an example, or Siebenlinden or Damanhur, in some places in Latin America and India. But most eco-villages have a very certain clientele. So they have either spiritual or ecological or financial barriers to enter. So this is not the right place, because we want a scalable model, a normal village with people, with normal people who can experiment what they like to do and who want to be part of this, like the president of Idananova. When we talked to him 3 years ago, he said, this could be a good idea for doing that. I'm just missing the thing where I can move the slide. There it is. So creating prototypes for a better world, learning, working, and living together in a dozen or more living laboratories of learning villages spread around the globe. That's the basic idea there. This is a postcard we developed just to show you have those being space regions. We defined it that there's a core in this region of several hundred people, and the region itself maybe a couple of thousand people. And you have circular economies there. You have, most importantly, a learning environment. So each village becomes a university. A university, similar like Tryon said, he's part of the network, that you start project-based learning there, and you have the environment for that. That you have a new experimental economic model in these regions. Use complementary currencies, or what I will explain later, also our approach there. And food is very important in preventive health systems, that you have a healthy environment, food, the houses you are building, that you go away from concrete or petrol-based materials to natural materials, and the ecosystem reforestation. So with Plan for the Planet, we reached the 100 million. A new start will be in March next year with an objective of 1 trillion trees. A lot of them in Africa and Latin America, and we will start a huge funding project for that, because this is for the climate change one of the most important spots, and hopefully a percentage of it will go into permaculture. So just to go to some of those aspects, the learning aspects, the university will be a people-based university. The idea is that people themselves define their curriculum together with experts and give their own degrees. Their own degrees when they reach the objectives, and the peer group agrees that they reach the objective of gaining the knowledge or the skills. So that we get rid of the governmental or university requirements. The universities are partners for that. We have already several universities which can bridge to the normal system, but that you can also independently gain your knowledge, and it should be free for everybody. That you don't have to pay, you have to give something in reverse, but it's not money. It's primarily project-based, so we did several projects in the Balkans the last years. So it's not so much theory. You go first in the practical thing, and then you see the theory behind it. And also e-learning is very important because there is the resource. A lot of eco-villages don't like the computers. We love them, as long as you use them meaningfully and not for games alone or so. But gaming is also important because a lot of young people like to play, and if you play with knowledge, if you play with skills, you learn faster. As an approach also, how to know that you do it, we think of self-assessments. I was an auditor and assessor also for the European Quality Awards, and I think it's quite a good process where you self-define if you do it right, and the peer group helps you with that. So the next part, the working part, I think we only need eco-social entrepreneurships around the globe, non-profit organizations, and the world will be different. We are a long way from that, but if you reinvest all the profits for the common good and for society, I think it would help. And as we cannot reach it at the moment, why not do it in our small systems? In the communities who participate, that we really foster a non-profit approach, that the profits are reinvested for the good of the common. And one approach now, for those of you from Germany and Austria, we are just creating a People's Bank, the first people-owned bank in Europe. It is a cooperative, and we have already about 60,000 people who are joining the foundation process. It's quite difficult to get the banking rights from the governments, but we are on the way. So one of the bigger ethical banks in Germany joined this process and will help getting that, the GLS bank. And probably next year you can open an account there. The sharing resources in villages, some mayors does this, especially our friend from France who spoke this morning. They are starting a lot on the community, on the municipality level, and we just calculated for one part for South Tyrolia, for example, or in a city like our city where I was born in Augsburg with about 500,000 people in the municipality, and you have 300,000 cars. And it does not make sense. If you look that most of the cars are idle for 97% of the time. The commuters, they commute half an hour or 20 minutes and it stands there. And it's an economical waste. I mean, to have these billions of euros of cars sitting around the street, and also the infrastructure you need for that. So if we start examples of sharing communities without cars, just some electrical mobility things in this region, and more electric bicycles with solar energy and so on. It could be a lot of money gained, which you can invest in other parts. Complementary currency that not just for the region, but also on a global scale, that you use one complementary currency for those alternatives. There are now in Europe about 300 currencies. You need somehow that you have some currency from a German part that you can make your vacation in Portugal with like-minded people, or in Greece. And that way it makes it much more attractive to use this complementary currency. And we are talking also now with the fair coin people. It's not Bitcoin, it's really on a service-based alternative currency, which is then much more usable for everybody on an electronic basis. Our 50% model means that you can you spend 50% of your time for this alternative community in one of the basic service levels for the people in the villages, which means food production, health, education, or art and culture. And for that, you get free accommodation, free food, free learning opportunities, and you have 50% of your time to do whatever you like. This is a model also presented by Fridtjof Bergmann, a friend of mine, a philosopher, who started the New Work, New Culture movement 30 years ago in Detroit, and we try to implement it now. So it's different from the basic income model because all the value created remains within the groups of the UnaVision network. We have to test it whether it works. It's a risk, but we want to start next April with the first 2 or 3 regions to start implementing it. For the health, healthy living, food, a lot of our health issues are related to our lifestyle, the way we work, the way we do not move. I hiked through half of Europe, and before that I felt sick every day sitting in front of the computer. But by walking 3,000 kilometers, you feel the change within 1 month in your body. You feel much healthier. I also switched to vegetarian food about 6-7 years ago. Now I eat more conscious, maybe once a month meat or so. And I'm really glad that next week I get another piece of meat from someone, a local supplier. So it's quite a different lifestyle then. And also this fostering again traditional medicine. And I got sick in Mexico, and a shaman helped me, and 3 hours later I felt very good. And otherwise the doctor would have pumped maybe a lot of stuff in my body. And we forgot how to use those herbs and these things to learn this again. The ecosystem, of course, you are all aware about this, how we produce food, that we come back to more permaculture, more Demeter and whatever we talked about the last couple of days. So where are we at the moment? We want to start in April. In Germany was the first place, and probably in Slovenia, and find more regions who are ready to start. Region means people, so that you have the first people, and with, if possible, in connection with transition towns, with eco-villages, but the municipality is always very important, because then you can get some support from the region you have there. A couple of weeks ago, we went to Ethiopia, and this will probably be a pretty fast process. Ethiopia is a very unique country. It's the only country in Africa which was never colonized. And they had a communist period 30 years ago, which is good today because they publicized a lot of land, and it's easier to get land now. And land grabbing in Africa is terrible. We heard this morning about that, and when I moved to Eastern Germany, I thought, oh, there's a lot of land. But it's very hard to get agricultural land in Eastern Germany. It's all bought up by big companies, and the prices are skyrocketing. the rise is about 100% the last 3 years. So for small farmers to buy land is very difficult. So Ethiopia will plan to have within a village area a new village built for 500 people, but the community around is involved, so it brings people together to create this learning community. In Mexico, similar, and it's amazing how much we can learn from these communities. The CO2 emission, what they have is more or less zero compared to ours. So also the community decision making in Mexican villages, we can learn a lot because they make consent community decisions and how to share the land in the villages and so on. So there are many things from indigenous groups which we can relearn. Maybe it was in our places 3,000-4,000 years ago, but somehow we were colonized by the Greeks and Romans, and we still are in this period that we have centralized governments and a lot of messy things going around us. So some examples here. This is in Ethiopia, in the south of Ethiopia. We collaborate there with a local university, and for them it's quite new because we have 6 faculties involved in a collaboration from the health, architecture part, agriculture part, and so on. They never did that before. And so from all the faculties, people came out to the country, and now the people come and join all of the faculties. So it will be an interdisciplinary approach to that. In Slovenia, it's in the mountains. A lot of the vineyards are dying. The wine farmers, they get from the cooperatives €1 per liter, so no one can survive on that. And if they sell it directly, it's €2. So we like to get some of this land and also revitalize this village of about 300 people. The mayor loves it also a lot, and some of the neighbors are also willing to collaborate there. In Germany, it's one thing on the Polish border. It's an abandoned barracks from 1880. So we will bid on a government auction, and I'm living in a village around, so we try to get in contact with the villagers, which is much harder than I thought. It's at the end, we have in Germany, one of the richest countries in Europe maybe, but we have very extreme poverty also in these areas. Half of the people are unemployed in the remote villages, and they are very distrustful to the government. On the election 2 weeks ago, 30% in this region voted for the right-wing party. So it's a very extreme situation in the region. Kosovo it's also quite extreme. 80% of the young people are unemployed, but they don't want to go back to the countryside. They want to go to Germany, to France, to the US, and do whatever, but not at home. So how to make it attractive again? So we did focus groups in Berlin, in Vienna, Pristina, in Athens, and in Mexico City, and asked primarily the target group between 18 and 30 years, if you stand in front of the decision to move next year to a village in the countryside, what needs to be there that you decide on this move? And it probably will be very similar in Lisbon or Madrid. So the answer, there were 4 things which came out from the couple of hundred people we asked. The first one was internet. Internet connection, fast internet, not slow internet. It has to be fast. Fast internet connection. Then the next one, we need work. We need some income, which we want to get rid of because you have food, you have accommodation and so on. Then the third one was, am I going alone there, 3-4 people? No, I need the big city. Then we made the questions more specific. How many people has to be there that you are going, of your age group, yeah? And the result was at least 30 of this age group. Some was 20, some 40, but not 10. 10 is too little, because if we get in trouble, I don't know where to go. With 30 people, you have meet some other girlfriend. Which means that the total community, if you take the different age groups, is about 150 minimum, which is also from the pattern language, and I discussed that a lot with Rob Hopkins also and some other people. It's a minimum size of former villages. 500, 600, 800 is then a good community size where you still know many people, and especially that you have enough services, the bakeries and so on, that they can survive. And the last point, which is not to neglect, that there has to be some art and culture and social activities around, so that they make theaters. So we made movie evenings in the village. At the beginning, I picked the wrong movies. So Demain, tomorrow was one of the movies, and the villagers didn't like it. So we started also with some fun movies and then added some documentaries afterwards. And that is more fun then. So you eat the knowledge with fun. Yeah, funding approaches, money is always important. One is the participants themselves. Some have money, some not. So on the first one, we found one or two who will hopefully sell their apartments now and move out. And others give maybe what they have, so that it's not a barrier. That's important. Crowdfunding, so we'll start a crowdfunding campaign next spring in the countries who participate. And we are also trying to reach rich people in each country. So we identified a rich Albanian where we can present this. We wrote to several rich soccer players in Germany and so on. So we identify key people who could be supporters, not just for a couple of €1,000, but for much more funding. And of course, for the beginning, European grants or other grants will be important. For some specific approaches, like in Africa, there's a new movement which was inaugurated by our guru from our movement. It's the Global Marshall Plan, the Marshall Plan with Africa, which the German ministry adopted 1 year ago and the European Union about 6 months ago. There's a political reason behind it. Africa has still a huge growth rate, of population growth rate. So it's 1.1 billion, and by 2015 will be 2 billion people. And the European Union as a whole is very afraid of those couple of 100 million people. What will they do if they don't have anything to eat? They will come to Europe. It's the closest place. So now we have a couple of 100,000, but what happens when 10 million, 20 million, 50 million people all of a sudden move to Europe? So the solution is you need to find food in Africa to produce food. And for this you need to grow trees, need to get the water and so on. So this is the background idea of the Marshall Plan for Africa, a huge effort where all of Europe will work on creating food and jobs for Africans in Africa, not in Europe or so. But the problem is, when you look at the distribution system of money, it will go probably in the wrong ways. It will go to the bureaucracy of the African countries and to big companies. So we want to set an example and hopefully find many more villages that a bottom-up approach comes up. That the villages, the people get directly small amount of money to plant trees and to start little permaculture farms. And I think the money is much better invested than when you lose 90% by the government hierarchies. It will be a big political challenge, but to start it somewhere. And social investors, the idea is that if you invest in this whole group of maybe 20 or 30 regions in Europe, you don't get your money back, which sounds bad, in money, but you get it back in services and products from the regions. So to create this kind of fair trade regional network, where you give 10,000 euro in, and within the next 10 years you can sleep in the region, you can get the cheese and the wine and the olive oil, and you have and you supported a good purpose. In this way, the cash flow for financing the investments could be solved. And that's what we want to experiment. What you can do is either start a group in your region or join a region or give your knowledge in. We are just starting knowledge groups for the economic part, for the agriculture part, the architecture, landscaping part, so that online you discuss solutions for the different regions and give help to them. Yeah. Next steps, we are starting here. This is one of the talks. We have next month in Berlin a two-day meeting, then in Slovenia a meeting, and in Ethiopia. So the whole next years there will be many locations like this where people meet for 1, 2, 3 days and talk about the initiative. Also, the transition towns are good starting points in the regions where they are. Eastern Europe are very few active ones, but other mayors are often a good starting point too. That's why we invited also the mayors from this region and from other regions, because they are very important. And to find out that they are not corrupt, which in Eastern Europe is not so easy, because like Bulgaria, it's half of the mayors are corrupt in this way. No. Thank you. So. Just we are starting also a community platform for the working groups. It's a wiki platform where each group has its own environment, and they can start discussion and put all the profiles in. And there are some links. You get the presentation then by mail. So do you like to sit down here, or should we sit here in a circle? Circle? So. These are just some links. There will be many more. First, any direct questions? Or? So then please, if you want to sit on the floor, please come up here. For 100 hectares? This is, so when you calculate how much land, agricultural land you need to feed the people in a region, and then for the housing and other purposes, it's just a estimation, because the land requirement is quite different on the location you are. So in northern Germany, where you have very rich soil, you need less.